Welcome to the Effortless English Show with the world's #1 English teacher, AJ Hogue, where AJ's more than 40 million students worldwide finally learn English once and for all, without the boring textbooks, classrooms, and grammar drills. Here's AJ with a quick piece to help you learn to speak fluent English effortlessly.
I'm AJ Hogue, author of Effortless English. Learn to speak English like a native. Join my VIP program at effortlessenglishclub.com, effortlessenglishclub.com. Speak English fluently and powerfully. Interview today. I'm doing an interview in just a couple minutes with Spencer Doman. Spencer Doman. Welcome those of you joining live. I'll just give a couple minutes for people to join now live. And I'll give you an introduction to Spencer Doman. Spencer Doman from Doman International. Now, Doman International, just give a kind of a background. Doman International helps parents who have children with special needs. Special needs. So what does this mean, special needs? This is a very vague word. It's not a specific word. But it basically means, more specifically, brain damaged, brain injured. This is the better phrase, I guess. Children. So these are kids with labels such as, it might be on the mild side, might be things like mild autism, right? Which is very, very common label that kids get. Could be things more serious like cerebral palsy. Could be, attention deficit disorder, right? Another very common label that kids get. And then again, on the more severe side, the more very serious side, mental retardation, on and on. So you get the idea. There's a very, very, very large range, and Doman International, they work with parents. This is one of the things I love about them. We're working with them. We have a son who has some issues, a baby boy, as many of you know. And we're working with Doman International. And what I love about him is that they work with parents because, they know that and they realize that parents are the #1 therapists, helpers for their children. So anyway, we're going to talk to Spencer in more detail about what they do, who they help, and how you can help children with any of these kinds of issues. Spencer is the grandson of, Glenn. Glenn Doman was the founder of kind of this method, this system for helping brain-injured children, and his whole family is really involved. Most of his family, and then the founder's son is also involved with Doman International, and then now Spencer is the grandson. So it's really nice also that they have this family tradition, within their group. All right, well, I'm just going to give him a call and not talk too much. As you know, I like to just shut up and let our guest talk. I just want to give just a second, make sure we got our live audience. Hello, everybody. Lots of people from Costa Rica, Italy. I guess you guys are locked inside your houses, so it's a good time to watch videos. Hey, Lisa, good to see you. Ryan, the Philippines, good to see you as well. All right, guys, and Pablo, nice to see you. All right, guys, as usual, I will ignore your comments for now. Okay, I'm gonna talk to Spencer, and we'll let him talk about what he does and give us some more information. And then hopefully he has some time, and I'll come back to your live questions, and you can ask him questions. Don't ask me questions today. You can ask me questions another time. Ask your questions to him. Okay, but wait, we'll let him talk first. All right, time for me to call him, and let's get going. Hello. Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, AJ, how are you?
I'm good. I just realized I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yes. You look good. Yeah, the lighting, everything looks fine.
Great.
Great. Well, I just gave a brief introduction of you and Doman International. So I've got two cameras. So if it looks like I'm looking away, it's just because I'm looking at the other one. So I'm just going to jump right in, and I want to start with the quote from your course that I love, that comes from your grandfather, which is we don't leave the wounded behind. And if you could discuss, the meaning of that in the context of special needs kids.
Yeah, sure. Well, my grandfather, Glenn Doman, was a physical therapist. But before he went into physical therapy, he was a soldier. He served during the Second World War. And, he spoke about how he learned as an officer. He led a company of 300 men, that he was taught as an officer, you never leave the wounded behind. And he realized what that really meant when he was in warfare. And when he came home and he decided to kind of dedicate his life to helping kids and individuals with special needs, with brain injury, with neurodevelopmental conditions, he looked at that saying in a different way, which was that families need to come together and do whatever they can to help the person in the family whose brain has been affected. And so that's what he meant. We never leave the wounded behind. At Doman International, we feel very passionately about that. We don't look down on people with brain injury and special needs. And for our families, it's a reality. They have a loved one who's been afflicted, and we don't leave them behind.
Oh, fantastic. Wonderful. Yeah. Could you talk a little also about, I think one of the first things, speaking from experience, in fact, directly, that when a parent or parents learn that, their child may have an issue, and then often they'll turn to the medical industry, and what they get there is often a big dose of hopelessness, I would say. Yeah. So if you could kind of, and one of the things that I just loved about Doman International was that was the first thing, was that it's like, it's not hopeless, and could you kind of address that as well?
Yeah. And just to be clear, when we talk about the population of people and children that we work with, and we talk about special needs, we mean children with neurological conditions. So these children might have diagnoses like autism, cerebral palsy, developmental delay, epilepsy, even genetic abnormalities like Down syndrome. And so they come to us with this wide variation of neurodevelopmental conditions. But what we found is that these children can be helped because of a phenomenon called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change, to heal even when it's been injured by stimulation in our environment and the activity that we engage in, right? So we may not realize it, but the activities that all of us engage in every day have an impact on our brains. And so what we found is that if we do the right kind of stimulation, the right kinds of activities, that people with brain injury, with neurodevelopmental conditions can develop at a faster rate because of neuroplasticity. And a lot of research has been done on neuroplasticity. It's almost become a household term at this point. Probably most of your listeners have heard of it. But it's a very, very important thing because in the past, looking at individuals who had suffered some kind of brain damage, it was really looked at as a hopeless thing.
Right.
It was like, well, the brain controls everything. It's been damaged, so that's it. And that's far from reality. The brain has actually an amazing ability to heal. By the way, many people who have suffered brain damage, the brain sometimes will just on its own through neuroplasticity heal. But unfortunately for many of the patients that we see who are mostly children, more intervention is needed. And so that's what we do. We teach families what are activities, what are programs they can do with their kids to help speed that development.
And could you then just talk, kind of make, I guess, generally the approach that you take and so what can parents do, and what's the approach that you take that helps speed up that process of the brain healing and adapting?
Well, first of all, we take a very integrative approach. What we found is that the best way to tackle this problem is by coming at it from a very holistic viewpoint. And so basically every child, every patient that we see, we try to address 4 important areas of their development. The first is their cognitive development, which is their ability to comprehend, their ability to read, do math, all of our intellectual abilities. The second is how to develop them in mobility. Many of the children we see lack mobility. They may have poor ability to move their bodies or use their hands. The third area is nutrition. Diet is very important for brain function. And the fourth area is breathing and respiration. And so we've developed certain Doman method programs that are specially designed just to help breathing. So we've found that when we tackle these 4 areas together, cognitive, physical, nutrition, and respiration, we can get the brain to change fastest.
Fantastic. Another thing that drew me and that I appreciate about Doman International is that your emphasis on parents being the ones who deliver. It's not because actually before with our son that we had a physical therapist coming to our home for a while before we got involved with you, and it was only once a week, and I don't know, we weren't seeing any results, but if you could talk about why do you focus so much on and feel it's so important that the parents be the ones?
Yeah, I think that this is one area where the Doman method really was a paradigm shift in terms of treating brain injury. Because, as you said, the typical treatment out there for kids with special needs is maybe physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, once, maybe twice a week for 30 minutes. And the truth is that even the greatest therapist in the world can't achieve much in such a small amount of time.
Yeah.
And so the reason why Doman International focuses so much on teaching parents is, first of all, no one loves children more than their parents, right? And because the parents love their kids, they're more dedicated to their kids than anyone else. They also have more time to give their children and their development. And because of that, we found that when we empower the parents with that information so they know exactly what to do at home with their kids, we get the best results. And, my grandfather, Glenn, who started this, he started first with a clinic where patients would come and live at the clinic and do the treatment programs. But what he found is that when he told the parents what to do, and then they went home and did it, they actually got better results than he and his team got. And so he changed his own approach when he found it. Because we are a very results-oriented team at Doman International. We really do. We're happy to throw something out if we find something else that works better. And so, that's what he found. And so he changed courses at that point.
If there's someone out there who has a child who's been diagnosed with like you said, this amazing array and range of conditions, I mean, what's the first step? What should they do?
Well, I think first of all they can look into reading my grandfather's book, which is What to Do About Your Brain Injured Child, It's an excellent book. It gives the foundations of our program. I'd also recommend that they go to domaninternational.org, which is our website. And, we have a blog, we have an e-newsletter. We do try to give away a lot of information for parents and families so they know what to do. And we even have free webinars going. We have a Facebook page. So I think parents should start by just looking into Doman International and the Doman method. And we do have an online Doman method course, which is a course for parents of kids with special needs who want to learn how to implement our programs at home. And I have to kind of say, looking right now, at the current situation of the world and the coronavirus and how many of us are kind of stuck at home at this time, I think it's really fortunate that we have this online Doman method course. So, if parents want to learn more about helping their kids with special needs, they can find out what to do.
Absolutely. And the other great advantage of it is, like I'm in Japan and my audience is all over the world. And, like for me to get to, well, I guess you guys are in Philadelphia area?
Yes,
yeah, like, so for me to fly, because I thought, I got to fly to Philadelphia. And then when I saw you had this online course, I was like, this is so great. And we could just jump in and get started. And we've already seen some, seeing great results with our son. And so we don't have to wait to go, quite far for us. Yeah. And I know, like I said, we have people in Europe, we have people all through around the world, Asia, South America. So it's really great. I thought the online course was excellent. And again, it's on the screen, guys. It's domaninternational.org. Just to briefly hit those 4 areas again. So cognitively, there's another thing. It was part of your online course. I think it was your speech, actually, where you talked about the difference between intellectual ability, understanding, and the ability to express it. And how this, how so many children and adults with brain or neurological issues get treated like they're stupid when in fact they're not. And if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So what we have found is that actually there's no relationship between brain injury and intelligence. But there is a relationship between brain injury and the ability to express intelligence. So what this means is that someone might have a special need. They may not even be able to speak, but they can still be highly intelligent. It's just that their ability to demonstrate what they understand might be compromised, right? One of the best examples of this, I just use it as an example because people understand it, is Stephen Hawking, who was the great astrophysicist, who, was born perfectly fine. And then, as he aged, he had something called motor neuron disease, where he lost all of his function to speak, to use his hands, to walk. And fortunately for Stephen Hawking, because of his connections, technology was created for him so that he could continue to communicate. And so everyone knew that even though he couldn't speak anymore, he was still the brilliant man that he always had been. And what I always point out to parents is that I say, look, if Stephen Hawking had been born the way that he was later on in life, what would people have thought about him? They would have seen someone who doesn't move, doesn't speak, and very possibly have considered him to be unintelligent or stupid or not understanding anything,
right,
when exactly the opposite was true. And so we really tell parents, first of all, you need to believe in your child's understanding. There's a whole world out there, by the way. There are, plenty of people in society don't believe in these kids. So the last thing a child needs is parents who don't believe in them. And it's a very damaging thing, by the way, to tell all of the adults in a child's life that a child is unintelligent, right? Because if I say to you, your child has autism, your child has cerebral palsy, your child has developmental delay, and your child is not going to be as smart as other kids, they're not going to succeed in school, automatically the way the adults interact with that child will completely change, right? Maybe their vocabulary will change. Maybe they won't explain things to the child. Maybe they won't read to the child as much because they've been told the child won't understand. So it's a very damaging thing. It's almost a kind of experiment to tell adults this thing. And it's a limiting thing to tell adults. And so we don't engage in that. And so we do the exact opposite. We tell parents exactly how to stimulate their kids and how to do it as much as possible.
Right. And there's some great, just fantastic, in the book you mentioned and other books, just some amazing stories of brain injured kids who maybe were having trouble expressing themselves and learned to read way above age level and very, very early, and just amazing intellectual abilities that, I think that how to put it, the mainstream that a lot of folks out there, even within, like I said, the medical and therapist communities didn't realize or don't realize, that there's this perception. And we've seen that with our son too, like he picks up on things very, very quickly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And actually the Doman method and my grandfather Glenn are best known for our work with early child development, early childhood education. And this applies to all children, by the way, kids with special needs and well children alike. But my grandfather actually discovered the brilliance of young children with the kids with special needs that he saw. A tiny 3-year-old child came into his office, a boy with cerebral palsy, named Tommy. And this 3-year-old was reading already. And so he watched this child and he said, hey, if a child who's supposed to be mentally retarded, that was the term used by the professionals, not my grandfather.
Right.
I never ascribed to that term. But if a child at 3 with that diagnosis could read, why couldn't other kids do it? And so that's why he developed reading programs, math programs, all kinds of early child education programs, so that kids could reach their fullest potential.
Fantastic. Moving on to the next category of mobility. Can you talk about the importance of mobility? Of course, not just for moving around, but how it affects the other areas as well. I mean, we've noticed this ourselves with our baby. As he becomes more mobile, like it's just like his whole brain is just boom. Like everything is activating more.
Yeah, exactly. So mobility and movement helps many other areas of neurological development. And a lot of these things aren't obvious, that you wouldn't necessarily think of it as common sense. But for example, the midbrain, which is an area of the brain which is used for things like crawling and creeping, activities that babies do, are also very important for visual control and movement. So very often when kids move more, parents start to see visual improvements. Also, the same area of the brain is responsible for auditory processing. So again, sometimes a child begins to move for the first time and parents start to notice, wow, he's following instructions more, he's interacting more with us. So, mobility can improve focus and concentration. There's a reason why schools that have physical activities built into their day have higher cognitive test scores, for example, because it helps kids focus, concentrate. Mobility can help so many things. It boosts immune system function. It's good for digestion. So mobility helps almost everything. And that's why it's such an important part of the integrative program.
And it is such a tragedy because so many schools now are, as you said, they're cutting or eliminating those programs, and let's just lock the kids in a chair, immobile all day. It's just horrible.
It's horrible, and it achieves the exact opposite of what they're trying to do. They think if they focus more on academics, they'll raise the test scores, but that is the opposite from what often happens, unfortunately.
A quick tangent, just because it's something that I am very enthusiastic about, which is homeschooling, and I know that many of the Doman parents are not only do they homeschool their brain injured kids, but also their well kids as well. If you could just talk about that, as just your opinion of homeschooling in general.
Yeah, sure. So we're big supporters of homeschooling. Now, I do have to say, some Doman parents homeschool their kids. Some parents, especially our Doman parents with kids with special needs, their goal is to bring their child home, do the Doman method intensively at home with the child in order to prepare their child to go back to school and join their peers. So, we have parents in both groups. We are passionate about only sending a child to school when they can be successful in school. Often, kids with special needs, when they go to school, they have a very difficult time succeeding, keeping up with the other kids from an academic standpoint, from a physical standpoint, from a social standpoint. And so we found if we can implement the programs more consistently at home, we can prepare them better for school. And then on the other hand, yeah, absolutely. For kids with special needs, kids, a lot of Doman parents do homeschool. And it's because they want to give their child the kind of individualized education that they feel would be best for their child. And we have found that kids really succeed in that situation as well.
And as you kind of mentioned, it's just these labels that are so destructive, and even. I guess you covered it too. That even things like that are so common now, like ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, autism, on and on and on and on. So they're that then get treated by drugs. There's labels and a label and then a perception that this kid is now something's wrong with his intellect.
Yes.
He's a slow learner, and as you said, the perception and the label then affects how everybody treats that child, which will then, it's that self-fulfilling prophecy where
Absolutely.
then it will then get, the child will get worse results.
Exactly. And there are hundreds of different labels or diagnoses given to kids with neurodevelopmental conditions. And, it's not just about the diagnosis. As you said, it's about the prognosis. It's about the prediction that is given with the diagnosis, which is really detrimental. And, often with this population of kids, parents are told things that with other populations would never be accepted. Imagine, for example, if, God forbid, I was a parent and my child was diagnosed with something like cancer, and if I went to a professional, a doctor, and the doctor told me, sorry, this is a incurable condition, there's not much we can really do. Well, I wouldn't accept that as a parent. I'd say, well, I'm going to find someone else who can get me answers. But with kids with special needs, this is dealt to parents all the time. Yeah. And by the way, often with that attitude of like, well, sorry, there's nothing we can do.
Yep.
And it's that sense of hopelessness. It's like giving someone a diagnosis and saying this is incurable. There's nothing that can be done. And we don't accept that.
Another thing, what we encountered was a sort of kind of like, oh, well, we don't know. Let's wait and see. I don't know, because, we could obviously see and even more so because we have twins. So one is kind of actually even a little probably above developmental age. And so then with our son, we could just, the gap between the two, we could say something's wrong. There's something not right here. And so we'd ask the doctors and they'd be like, well, let's wait and see. But then, I kind of just intuitively knew that, well, we should get started as early as we can, and wasting precious time is crazy. And so there's kind of that attitude too, like, well, there's nothing we can do. Who knows? Whatever.
Yeah. Well, over the past, 60 years since my grandfather started this work, every family that we've ever seen, we always ask them the question, who was the first person who observed your child had a developmental problem? And I would say something along the lines of 90% or more. It's either a parent or a grandparent who notices it first. And often they do get that answer of let's wait and see, hold off, let's see what happens. And I was actually watching a video of yours, AJ. I hope correct me if I'm wrong, where you had said something along the lines of like you were looking at your son and you could see in his eyes that he was smart. Like you could just see that.
Yep.
And my grandfather always pointed out that parents, even though they may not have been educated or given like scientific knowledge around neurological problems, there's something innate within them, which is looking out for their child and their child's development. Mm-hmm. The first thing every parent does when the baby is born is count their fingers and toes. They want to make sure everything with the baby is okay. And so, yeah, oftentimes, parents will notice these tiny developmental things and bring it to professionals, but they're often told, let's wait and see. And yeah, I think that sense of urgency of let's help this child and help them as soon as possible is really, really important.
And I would say that to, any when listening now, that if you've noticed something, and maybe you've been told that, just go to domaninternational.org, start, read the books, and even if your child ends up being like 100% totally well, all these things are still helpful. I mean, you'll probably
Absolutely.
jump their development up anyway.
Sure, and even if a parent just wants someone to kind of bounce some thoughts off of and say, even if they want to contact us and just say, my child is this age and this is where my child's milestones are, and maybe they're concerned about something, we'll be happy to let them know from our experience if that might be a sign of a developmental delay, or if maybe they're worrying about something which is normal.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great. I'd like to, if you don't mind, I'd like to go ahead and go to let the people watching live ask some questions. If that's
Absolutely.
all right with you. Okay.
That's
Are you okay
fine.
with time? You're okay?
Oh yeah, plenty of time.
Okay, great. All right. So those of you watching live now, you can start. I'll give you a minute here to go ahead and type questions if you have about children with special needs, children's development, etc. Okay. Well, here's a question about language. Samuel says, do you have the course in other languages, Spanish or Portuguese specifically?
Yes. Yeah, so we have the online course in Spanish. So if you reach out to Doman International, if you go to the website, as AJ said, we will connect you with the correct representative for your language. So currently we have the course in English, Spanish, Italian, Russian, and I'm missing, and Serbian. Those are the 5 languages we currently have it in.
Okay, great. Hey, and all you are learning English, so you can handle it in English. You guys will be okay.
That's right.
That's right. All right. But I understand that, people want to make sure they get all the nuances of.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, I'm just filtering through comments here. Sorry.
Sure.
Okay. Well, while I'm filtering through the comments, if you could talk about as well, you mentioned mobility and the cognitive ability. What about the nutrition aspects, and why are those important?
Well, most of your listeners have probably heard of neurons, which are brain cells. But we actually have neurons located throughout our body, right? Because our brain and the rest of our body is constantly in communication with one another. And so in our digestive tracts, there are actually 500 million neurons. Outside of our brain, the largest number of neurons are in our gut, our digestive tract. Mm-hmm. And our brain and our gut is constantly sending messages back and forth. So what we eat can influence brain function. And kids with special needs tend to be more sensitive in their diets than the average person. And so there are certain kinds of foods that kids with special needs are more likely to be intolerant to. And so sometimes we need to look closely at their diet. We also have to look closely at supplementation, making sure they're getting the right supplements, because again, we've found that the brain functions better when we're looking at that.
I see. Yeah, it makes sense. And as you said, really it's a process of brain development, brain healing and growth. And so obviously nutrition, as with muscles, right? Bodybuilders, for example, are very focused on nutrition and getting the right things to build the muscles. And so obviously it's a similar idea that you want to feed the brain as much nutrition as possible, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Can you talk about, just because I know it's such a common, I guess I'll use the word label or diagnosis, autism.
Yeah.
And what is autism? Because first of all, that's confusing. Because it gets applied to so many kids who have such a wide and different range of behaviors. If you could talk about what is it, and and how would can Doman International help parents who have kids with
yeah,
autism?
You're absolutely right. In fact, it's called autism spectrum disorder because there's such a spectrum of of kids and symptoms present in that group. But basically, autism is a term used for a collection of symptoms observed in certain children, right? And so very often these kids might have speech delays. They might have difficulty relating socially to others. They might have auditory hypersensitivity. They might be hyperactive and lack concentration and focus. And so there are children that have very mild issues in these areas and children with very severe issues. But all of them have this condition because of something in their neurodevelopment. Their brain has not developed normally, and that's why they're exhibiting these symptoms. Because the brain is the body's control center. So if something's not going right in the brain, it can reap all kinds of havoc. And so, yeah, absolutely. We have seen kids diagnosed with autism for decades. And so we give them, again, an integrative program meant to boost their intellectual ability, improve their mobility. We give them a very specific nutrition program. And so absolutely, when the brain improves, you start to see the symptoms decrease, right? So as the brain develops, you start to see speech improving, concentration and focus getting better, and hyperactivity reducing.
And which kind of, as you just kind of mentioned there, speaks to the point of the difference between addressing the root of the issue, what's actually causing it, which is a brain injury or problem, as opposed to just the symptoms. Like, okay, they're not talking, so let's make them speak. And which right. I tend to see like the kind of the usual approach is just attack each symptom with some kind of
right.
therapy, and but not getting down to that root.
Yeah, and so like with any medical condition, finding the root cause is essential, because once you fix the root cause, the symptoms will start to go away. It's kind of like if I went to a doctor today and I said, "Doctor, my left arm all of a sudden feels numb, and I have terrible chest pain, right? And I feel severely nauseous." A good doctor will say, "Oh, these are all symptoms of a heart attack. I need to treat the heart." Yeah. Right? So sometimes the symptoms, it doesn't obviously show what the root cause is, but a good doctor will figure that out. And by fixing the heart problem, the symptoms disappear.
Yeah.
But if I went to a terrible doctor, they would say, "Oh, let me, give you a medication for the tightness in your chest, and let me massage your left arm until you feel it again."
Right.
And of course, we would know if that were to happen, the patient would die. So you have to find the root cause, and then you have to say, okay, what treatment can fix this root cause? And then, as you said, the symptoms start to go away.
Excellent. Oh, what about having children learn foreign languages, and even the children with special needs? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, we are big supporters of teaching kids foreign languages. One of the most amazing things about children is their ability to learn languages almost effortlessly compared to adults, right?
Yep.
If I went right now to, Japan, and I brought an 18-month-old American kid with me, if you checked in with us 18 months later, that now 3-year-old would speak better Japanese with me than me, right?
Right.
And that 3-year-old, by the way, would speak it with a good accent, and I would not. And it's because the baby's brain is set up to take in information rapidly from the environment and learn it. And so kids, first of all, are great at picking up foreign languages. And I always like to mention this. In many societies, there is a myth that children are confused when they're taught multiple languages simultaneously. And there's really no scientific evidence to back this up. In fact, there's only supportive evidence that bilingualism or multilingualism is a very positive thing for child development. And so, absolutely, we support speaking to children in multiple languages, reading to them in multiple languages. Well, children with special needs, it doesn't make a difference. And I always like to point out to parents with kids with speech development issues, if your child is hearing two languages spoken in their environment, they will now have two languages to choose from in communicating with other people. That's a positive thing. I saw a child recently that lived in a home where English, Spanish, and French were spoken. Now, the child's speech development was affected by their brain injury, and they understood all three languages because the child is highly intelligent. But because the child's speech was poor, the child could only say some words. But for example, the child could understand the English word apple, and then the Spanish word for apple, which is manzana, and the French word for apple, which is pomme. He understood all three words, but he was able to pronounce pomme, but he wasn't yet able to say manzana or apple. And if he had only heard, let's say, English in his environment, he never would have had the opportunity to communicate that word with his parents. So, often parents are told by professionals, just speak to your child in one language. But we found actually the opposite is true. Multiple languages make it easier for these kids to communicate.
Fantastic. Okay, from Jelena, are problems with mirror neurons related to autism?
Are problems with mirror neurons related to autism?
Neurons, yeah.
So, I did say before that autism is actually a diagnosis or a label given to a collection of different symptoms. So I don't want to say something that applies for all kids within an area, but the answer is yes. Mirror neurons could be affected in a child who has autism because mirror neurons allow us to relate and understand what other people are expressing and saying to us. So absolutely, a child with autism could have had mirror neurons affected when their brain was damaged.
Mm-hmm. I see. Someone's asking about nutrition here. Los Machacos. Do you recommend taking the children off of sugar? I assume that, yeah.
Yeah. So, I always like to say before I jump into nutrition that, I never like to give recommendations for all children out there because there are specific cases. And so I just need to be careful in that regard. But to answer the question, generally, yes, we do recommend to remove sugar from the diets of kids because we often find that that sugar can negatively affect a lot of kids with special needs. By the way, if I lined up, 100 nutritionists and I asked them all about their opinion on sugar, you would never find a single nutritionist that would say eating sugar is a healthy thing.
Right.
It's the one thing every nutritionist in the world will agree on.
Yeah.
So, yes, absolutely. We find that sugar often can negatively impact the behavior of children, focus, concentration, and for some children, it can be it can create inflammation. And so, I would generally recommend to remove it.
I see.
Yeah.
And I would assume that even with well children that
yes,
we're taking the same approach with
yes,
yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the parents have to be very careful about limiting sugar, limiting foods with food dyes, artificial colorings. These things can have really negative effects on kids with neurodevelopmental conditions. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that, certainly there are other foods. We find that our population of children are more likely to have intolerances to gluten and wheat, and also dairy as well. So we'll often look at those foods. And by the way, this is not just something done at Doman International. Many parents out there have become aware that gluten-free and casein-free diets are ideal for their children. But that is something we implement with many of the kids that we see.
We've got a few people asking about vaccines, the possible connections to autism, your general opinion about, I know there's a worry about vaccines affecting brain health. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So this is a very important and obviously a controversial topic. And so Doman International doesn't hold a official stance on vaccinations. And by the way, one of the reasons why is if you spoke even to our different staff, there's even difference in opinions amongst our staff. What we always recommend is that, first of all, don't give more than one vaccination at a time to a child. There's no reason to take that risk. Also, we would say never give a vaccination to a child who's already ill or who's, if their immune system is compromised, because we are concerned of additional risk factors with a sick child. I think that, this is a topic where it's best for parents to be educated. Even different world governments give different recommendations in terms of vaccinations. For example, I think Australia recommends something like 20 some vaccinations during the first 18 years of life. And the United States is about 60. So even different world governments, give different recommendations. Yeah. So I would recommend to parents, read up on this topic, look at where you live in the world and specific diseases and that you might be especially concerned about your child possibly contracting in your area. Obviously, consult your medical practitioner. But this is one area where we really say to parents, we feel that you need to make the educated choice that you feel is best for your child.
I see. Yep, that makes sense. Okay. A lot of people are talking about the coronavirus. But, related to that, it's funny because we've been doing the Doman program here and also because I work at home that I don't really feel very affected by all of this. And it is kind of, it comes to, brings me to another point, which is I feel that because you stress the parents being involved so much, and it is a very involved program. But I find that your approach strengthens the family as a whole, not just the one child. And if you could talk, and I know you've addressed this in your course as well, if you could talk a little more about that, because I think there is, maybe this perception. I know I had this actually before our children were born, where you always worry about things, and I thought, would I be able to handle something like this, and would it break our family apart with the stress of it? But so if you could talk about that as well, and how that this can actually be something that strengthens the family.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really passionate about families, and I think one reason why is because families are really at the heart of helping the kids that we are trying to help. And my grandfather, I remember him speaking to parents about this. If you look through the ages, empires have come and empires have fallen. Countries have risen and countries have fallen apart. But one unit that always stays are families. And this is because families are obviously a loving, cohesive unit, but also within families always make sure to give time to the person who needs it the most within the family, right? So if someone in the family is ill, the other family members will rally around and make sure that person is given the time that they need. And so absolutely, even having adversity, like a child with special needs, can bring a family together. Because if it brings this group, right, this unit together closer in a common mission, it can definitely deepen the love and the connection between the different family members. And what we always say, because I think I just have to mention this, one of the concerns for parents is that if they have a child with special needs, if they have another child who is developmentally normal, that the focus and the attention that they give to the child with special needs will negatively impact the other child, that the other child might feel neglected, jealous, left out. And so what we always say is make sure to include the other children in the development of your kid with special needs. Because if your other children feel like they have an important role in the family, if they feel like they are a crucial member of the family and involved in helping their sibling out, they will feel valued. They will feel respected because they'll know they're valued and respected. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think that having, any adversity can bring a family closer together if they know how to handle the situation.
Wonderful. Okay, a fairly specific question here. Is toe walking and speaking difficulty a sign of autism? What to do in this case?
So I wouldn't necessarily say it's those two things alone are a sign of autism. Speech difficulty can be a sign of a neurodevelopmental issue. Okay, so something with the child's brain development may not be normal. And so I would, and by the way, toe walking can also be a symptom of that as well. So I would recommend to this specific person to reach out to Doman International so we can get a kind of bigger picture of this child's development. But for autism specifically, I wouldn't say based on those two factors, yes. But I would say those are both two possible symptoms of something in brain development not being completely normal. And I always like to say, AJ, I think it sounds very scary to parents when I say that brain development, neurological development may not be normal. But when I use that term or that phrase, I actually feel empowered by it because we know the brain can improve. Yeah. So I always like to say, just because I'm saying that a child's brain may not have developed normally, it doesn't mean I'm talking about some kind of detrimental life sentence. Just the opposite. I think it's something that we can work on and hopefully fix.
Yeah, that's the great thing. I mean, I agree. That once we realized, there are things we can do, that then it becomes actually quite empowering and exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So great. So contact them. Okay, here's another one now from Cleefy. This is one that also, this is a label that it's almost, in my mind, almost meaningless. Hyperactive, because it's used to describe such a massive range of behaviors from what is really just normal kids, right? Just being energetic, who don't want to sit in their butt exactly. in a chair for all day. Exactly. Two, maybe there is an issue. So, but anyway, is hyperactive disorder? Can it be a disorder, or is it just normal?
Okay. So as AJ said, it's kind of a tough thing for me to answer because there are many different things that could lead to hyperactivity. For example, if you take a 6-year-old boy and you force him to sit in a chair in school from 8 a.m. until 3 p.m. and he's kind of antsy, some professionals will look at that and say that child is hyperactive. And when in reality, for some of those kids, it was just like, well, actually, if you gave that child more physical activity, maybe you made sessions, teaching sessions a little shorter. 6-year-olds are not necessarily meant to sit in one place all day long.
Right.
But on the other hand, more severe kinds of hyperactivity that really limit a child from focusing and concentration absolutely can be a sign of a neurological issue or a neurodevelopmental condition. And so I think that it depends on the severity. I think it depends on how much it's really holding the child back. Definitely for this kid, even never having met him before, I would definitely be looking at nutrition factors like limiting sugar, limiting processed foods, limiting artificial colorings and food dyes. I would definitely be making sure a child like this is doing daily physical activity. And I mean real rigorous physical activity, probably playing sports, running, something along those lines. But if this parent has additional concerns to hyperactivity, maybe learning difficulties, speech issues, there are many different things I could mention, then I would recommend, again, they get in contact with us.
Okay. Yeah, and it's as you said, like I find so many of these labels to be they're so imprecise, and they're used so kind of haphazardly that it's hard to know what they're even talking about. Like what is, because I can picture, I've got a nephew here that some might describe as hyperactive, but he's just very, very energetic and curious and active, and there's nothing wrong with him at all. But then, like you said, there can actually be issues there. And it's just hard to picture, like, what are they talking about? Because this school officials and others can throw these things around so haphazardly.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes this is really negative, but I've even seen some cases where a teacher, just doesn't want that kind of energetic kid to be a kind of rambunctious or whatever, and is kind of like, well, he's hyperactive, and just slapping a label on it.
Very common.
But I think that one of the big questions here is that hyperactivity, whatever the symptom is this symptom holding the child back in life from achieving the goals that we have or that my child has? Because, of course, if a child cannot focus enough in school to learn how to read or learn math or can't relax enough to socially engage with others, that is a real problem.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to make that sound less than it actually is. And so, some of those children really do need a neurodevelopmental program like the Doman method to help resolve it.
Great. Let's see. Do you mind can you take a couple more? Is that okay?
I've got all the time in the world.
Oh, okay, great. Me too. All right. This is from Julia. Hey, Julia. Good to see you again. Do you recommend supplementing DHA and EPA for a teenage autist?
Okay. Generally, DHA, EPA is great. Omega-3s are great. They're good, from a general perspective, yes, for brain development. It's not the only supplement that we would recommend in our nutrition program, but yes, it's one of the most common supplements that we would recommend for a child.
Okay, great. Yeah, and here's Veronica, another question. Similar. How about omega-3s? Have they been linked to brain? So you just answered that. Great.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, this is a comment, but I guess I'll read it. Paula says, family is the most important thing. This gives us the base to deal with others and live among others.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we learn so much from our parents. I remember when I was getting my master's degree in early childhood education, the first professor I ever had said to all of us, look, it doesn't matter how great an educator you are. The most important adults in a child's life and in their educational success are their parents. And by the way, some parents are more conscious about this than others, but absolutely, that's what we're really trying to do. We're almost in the business at Doman International of parent enlightenment, trying to say, hey, these are all the things you need to know to be the best parent that you can be.
Well, and and there exactly, and as you mentioned, and I make similar points when I promote homeschooling, which is number one, like no one cares about your child, no matter how good a teacher is, no matter how good a therapist is, a doctor is. No, they just don't love and care about your child as much as you do as the parent, of course, and
yes.
They also can't spend as much time. So just those two things alone. Like we're doing with our son now, we're all day long we're doing things. Whereas before it was maybe, a therapist comes once a week and she was fine, but now we're doing it all day, every single day.
Right.
Which just that attention. And of course, also we're just hypersensitive to every little change. We know his mood, everything. So I think that, parents can get intimidated. And this is not only just about special needs, but I think just in lots of different areas, they can get intimidated by officials. Because when I talk about homeschooling, people get intimidated by, what would I do? Or maybe their child has various problems, and they don't realize. I think I have the same message: is that the parents are number one. They're the experts. They're the with the most power. They have the biggest effect. But anyway, I would just, if you could.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think there's a lot of self-doubt amongst parents of, I feel this way, but I'm not sure. And I'm getting this advice from my mother-in-law or from my pediatrician, and it doesn't feel right, but I feel like I have to go along with it. And what we have found, the vast majority of the time, parents' intuition is correct. If someone tells me a parent has something that they're feeling intuitively, I would basically put my money on it, because most of the time we find parents are right.
Yes, indeed. Right. Exactly. Parents are trust your gut, I guess would be the same.
Trust your gut. Exactly.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Well, this is from Gloria. Hey, Gloria. Good to see you. Addressing basically social issues now, or behavioral, what are often called discipline. How about children that get really upset when we ask them to do something?
Yeah. So I would say that behavioral issues, kind of like hyperactivity, it completely depends on the severity, right? Because obviously it's very normal for children to assert their independence, to sometimes debate with parents. All of that, is completely normal in child development. But obviously, it does reach a certain point where it can be a sign of a neurological issue. For example, some children with neurodevelopmental issues are very mentally rigid. Right. So it may be impossible for others to reason with them, to get them to understand or make deals with them. And mental rigidity can be a symptom of a brain injury or a neurodevelopmental condition. So it completely depends on the severity. And again, I would like to kind of urge parents, if you're not sure, right, if you've got a hyperactive child, a child who, maybe they've got maybe a very bad temper, if you're not really sure if it's something neurodevelopmental, or maybe it's just your child passing through a phase, if you get in touch with Doman International, one of our representatives can talk through it with you and then tell you, give you a little bit of feedback about what they feel.
Fantastic. Yeah. So if you have, these kind of specific concerns or questions, definitely contact them and talk to them. Okay, Slavika says, hey Slavika, in Switzerland, children who are hyperactive are given sedatives. The goal is to make them calm, so they don't disturb, so they're not disturbing.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately,
Previously, there were no hyperactive children. So, I guess she's saying that, maybe a couple decades ago, and they were just called restless kids.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's that there's a lot of truth to that. That what in the past was often considered a kind of just a rambunctious, energetic kid, where they'd say, this kid really needs to be playing more sports and be more active, and
Right.
and maybe needs to be doing more work with their hands, that kind of thing, working to the child's strengths, let's say. I think that now there's kind of this idea of, hey, kid, sit in your chair, be quiet, and listen.
Right.
And obviously, not all kids are like that. And getting back to the medication thing, medication very often is a symptom-focused approach to kids with neurodevelopmental issues, right? So it's there instead of fixing the root problem, which might be a lack of brain development. It's kind of like, okay, let me give this medication, which will, basically suppress brain activity and, in a sense, dull the child down a bit. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, maybe that child will be able to sit in class better, but those same medications can also reduce academic performance. So it might reduce that hyperactivity, but it might also reduce IQ as well. So often these medications have side effects which are not good. So yeah, again, for most of those children, we would definitely be looking at how do we actually fix this root cause.
Yes, indeed. And again, it kind of points to this problem of just this kind of haphazard labeling, and again, I would say, like, if you really don't know, contact them, and also trust your gut. Like I said, like I've got a nephew which I adore, and he is super energetic, but we all just know there's nothing wrong with him. He's fine, exactly. Right? Now a teacher he probably drives his teachers crazy, but so if you were you're very, I would say, I don't know if you agree, but if you really know, like, he's fine, there's nothing wrong with him. Again, trust yourself, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, this is interesting from Khalifi again. Can our compliments or our criticisms, discouragements, destroy the psychology of our kids? So, kind of worrying about the effects we have on our kids.
Well, certainly the way that parents and other adults interact with children absolutely can have a huge impact on the child's not just emotional state, mental state, but also their neurological state. And there have been many studies done about this, about children that really grow up. I'm talking about real extreme environments here, but in toxic environments where they might have very negative adults or, God forbid, abusive adults in their environment, and their brain development is absolutely impacted. Now, I'm going to take from this question, we're not really talking about that kind of extreme circumstance, but yes, I do think parents have to be very aware about the way they interact day to day with their children, the way they speak to their children. It's very important for parents to speak to their children in a very respectful way and speak to them in a way that respects the child's intelligence. And what I mean by this is try not to talk down to your child, try to explain things to your child, try to orient them throughout the day. Children look to their parents to know what's going on. And so it's very important to engage your child. And to get to the point about compliments and criticism, it's very important whenever your child does something which is positive, where you see they're really going out of their way to do something good. Absolutely, it's important to compliment them. Children learn from that kind of feedback from parents. And then in terms of criticism, of course, parents do need to point out to children when they're doing something which is not acceptable, which is not socially appropriate. Yes, it is the duty of parents to teach their children in this way. Obviously, criticism can get to the point where it can be cruel or nasty. Yeah. And so parents have to be very careful about their tone and their language. But the best way to handle it, in my opinion, is being very direct and straightforward with your child, but try not to raise your voice. Try not to lose your own temper, because that can be very upsetting to a kid. And try to really reason with your children. I think a lot of people underestimate kids and their ability to understand. And when you really kind of come down to their level, and what I mean by that is kind of making eye contact with them, explaining things, giving them the time to really understand what it is you're trying to teach them, kids will most of the time get exactly what you're trying to tell them.
Excellent. Okay, a couple more and then I'll let you go. From Lisa. Hey, Lisa, can the removal of heavy metals from the body help healing?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, some of the children that we see have very high levels of certain heavy metals in their bodies. So we'll see children sometimes with high levels of mercury, lead, arsenic, and other heavy metals. Heavy metals can come from all kinds of different environmental factors and even foods. And so yes, with certain children, we will work on detoxifying heavy metals from their system to help brain development. But what I do have to say something important about this. Sometimes there's a lot of information online about detoxing heavy metals, and you see whenever there are like chelation programs to pull heavy metals out of the body. But when you do that, you also pull certain minerals out of the body as well. And so honestly, sometimes certain chelation treatments are even irresponsible. It really needs to be done with the right kinds of professionals, tracking the child's progress. And so I just caution parents to be really, really careful about that.
Okay, great. All right, let's see.
And I'd just like to add, AJ, because we're in the digital age and the information age, there is, back when my grandfather started this work, there was no information out there for parents of kids with special needs. Now we live in the opposite, where you can go online and you can find a billion different things that parents are being told to do every day. And so now the tough thing for parents is trying to weed out the nonsense and get to the stuff that actually will help their kids. So you do have to be cautious and careful about what you read out there.
Yes, indeed. Okay, let's see. Okay, here's one. Raid says, what about a child who is shy, afraid of anyone from the outside, anyone from outside of the family? I don't know the age of the child, but...
Yeah. So just like we've said with the other behavioral things, it depends on the severity. Shyness can be a very normal personality trait. Some children are very introverted, and sometimes they need a little bit of time just to kind of come out of that shell. So I would, for a shy child, I would try to focus on giving them as many positive interactions, social interactions as possible. Complimenting them whenever possible when they succeed socially. But if some children with neurodevelopmental issues are socially withdrawn, and they withdraw sometimes from situations because of certain symptoms that they have. For example, if I have difficulty following conversations because of something neurodevelopmental, or let's say I have speech difficulty, or let's say I'm very sensitive in hearing. Many children that we see are very hypersensitive in their hearing. And so an environment which for you and I might seem normal can actually be frightening for them. And sometimes they'll shy away from social situations because they're noisy and upsetting to them. So again, it depends on the child. And so just shy alone, no, I wouldn't consider that to be a neurological issue. But for some children, shyness is a symptom of another problem that they have.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to have you back. We're going to talk about well kids and reading and just things that parents can do with all children. So I just want to thank you for taking so much time today, and just wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me, AJ.
Okay, well, have a great day, and we'll be I'll be in contact with you. Email. We'll figure out the next time.
Great. I look forward to it. Thanks so much.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. Thanks for joining.
Bye-bye. Thank you. All right. Wonderful. Okay. So just again, if you have if you have a child in your life, your child, someone in your family, friends, whatever, and you really have a concern, you're like, well, is this problem serious or not? Is it a serious issue or is it normal? Again, you can contact them, domaninternational.org. So go to that's their website. You can read more about them. You can see they've got some books. You could start with books if you want to. And you can just contact them and talk to somebody. And just they do Skype calls, so you could do a Skype call and discuss more specifically, talk about the specific issue. And they have, as he said, they are international, so they do have people around the world in different places that speak not all languages, but several languages. Certainly English, obviously. But so I definitely encourage you, if you have any concern about a child in your life, that just go ahead and contact them, and you can kind of get more specific information and ideas. If you know for sure, if you know, like, oh yeah, our child or a child I know definitely has some issues, then I absolutely encourage you to get in contact with them and probably take their course. We just finished their course. Their online course is it's about 3 weeks. It takes about 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. It's very, very good. And great thing about the online course is video, so you can, back up and rewind. You can watch it several times if you think you're missing something. You want to, listen to a point again, which I like. I think it's really great because, there were a couple sections in the course that were very specific to our baby, so I watched those a few times, And then also, as part of their course, you will have a 1-hour call, and you make a very specific plan for your child. So you will figure out exactly what's going on with your child, and then you will make a daily specific plan with them, and then you can keep working with them for months and months and years and years. So it's really, really great. I think they're fantastic. And as I said, we have seen some very nice improvements with already in just we've started doing their program I just read the book, and we started doing a few things that they suggest just in the book, and we started seeing some nice results already from that. And then with the course, and now we're doing more. Now we're really seeing our son is improving quite a lot. It's great, fantastic. So domaninternational.org. Now, as I mentioned, the Spencer will come back and we'll do another chat, and we're going to talk about kind of more general topics for all kids, not just special needs kids. Today we're focused on special needs kids, but we'll be talking about just kids, babies, kids in general, and teaching them, right? And this connects very closely to the topic of homeschooling, obviously. So reading, they have a reading program, for example. How do you teach a child to read, especially very small children? Because in Doman, they encourage you to start teaching reading at a very, very, very young age, babies. They have a math program, again, a very a math program for babies. And then other things too. We'll talk about all of that and just overall things you can do for any child that you have of any age. So Spencer will be coming back soon, probably within the next couple of weeks, I think we'll do it. So it'll be soon again. Okay, that's all, guys. So again, domaninternational.com. If you're just listening on the podcast, I'll spell it. It's Doman, Doman, which is their family name. Spencer Doman is his name. Doman International. It's all together. domaninternational.org. Please check out their website if you have any concerns at all. Okay, and connect with me on Gab, etc. You know what? Join my VIP program. I'll be back with another show soon. Lots of love to you all. And we'll see you next time. And again, thanks to Spencer. Really great. Fantastic. Bye for now.